starting. Got it. Go there. Let's see.
So be careful what you say.
We hear you. No, Dee, we do hear you.
Can you hear me? Mark?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay, great. Thank you.
Well,
Lynn.
See you twice.
You're going.
I'm getting off.
All right. Bye.
iPhone.
Still can't hear you. Huh.
Say something.
Oh, you need the wizard again.
Did you hit that unmute button thing on the bottom?
Well, her mute is, she's not muted, so.
Oh, okay. Right. I gotta put the fan on here.
So gonna stick with your phone, huh? It works. Now I gotta turn you sideways.
I'm trying to, I've never done this, Steve, on my phone. It's
It works fine. I mean, we can see you fine, hear you fine.
okay. As long as I
So-
can hear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello,
Hi,
Shirley.
Hi, Shirley.
Hi there, how are you?
We're okay. We're okay. Thank you.
Good, good.
I'm refilling my zero water filter this morning, so I had to do a couple of runs of clear, run it through.
Uh-huh.
Oh, okay. Did we do the prayer yet?
No,
No,
Oh, it's not time.
we
It's
haven't
still 8
started
minutes.
yet.
5 minutes.
I'm sure we'll get a couple more people.
Oh,
I
sure.
hope so.
Well, we had some fun at Junk in the Trunk, except there weren't a lot of buyers on Sunday.
Sunday,
Sunday, there
for
weren't a
sure.
lot. I heard that they cleared $881
Oh, that's good.
net,
That's very nice.
because
Yes, they
Thursday
didn't
was
do it
a
on
big day.
Sunday, that's for sure.
Thursday
No,
was a big
definitely
day.
do not do it on Sunday.
Yeah. So they said next year, if they do it again, they'll do Thursday and Friday. I don't
That's
understand that
better.
myself. I would have thought Sunday would have been a bigger day.
Yeah, that they could capture some people coming out of the church next door.
Well, they said that in the area that Thursdays is a big day for garage sales. I didn't
It
know that
is.
since we can't do it in Grand, so.
Oh,
But-
I do, because I have a friend, I have a neighbor.
Yeah.
She's a garage sale maven, Roman Catholic lady, garage sale maven. And she picks up great things Thursday.
Right.
By the time Saturday comes along, all the good stuff is gone.
Well, they usually, the big buyers that I remember back east on garage sales, or even in California, when we had a neighborhood one, twice a year, the beginning of the day and the end of the sale. The ones who want
Yeah.
the early bird specials and the
Yeah.
ones who want to get a price on the leftovers.
That's true.
That's right,
true.
yep.
So. All right, well, got a
So,
minute or two.
oh, we don't have Bernie. I hope he comes on.
No, Bernie. Small
Reba,
group
oh, there's
today.
Reba, yeah.
I think that's great, $800,
Eight,
Yeah, I
closer
do.
to 9. actually.
great.
Yeah,
I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Pam just notified us she'll be arriving a little late.
Oh, there's Bernie. Your ear's burning. We're talking about.
Good morning.
yes,
Morning.
Also,
fine,
the
Bernie.
next
Good to see
next
you.
temple thing up is the Mahjong tournament in April. Next fundraiser.
They're also having Hadassah luncheon and they're doing something.
Oh,
on
women's Seder, but that's Sister
Women's Seder too.
I need the audio. I'm not getting the audio.
Michelle, welcome
We got
back.
you, see,
Hi.
Cy, we hear you
Good
fine.
Morning.
We hear you fine, Cy.
Hi, Rochelle.
Oh, I'm not getting the audio.
How we doing, Dee? Do we hear you now?
Yeah, I had to go on my phone. I don't know. He had to go back. He's busy.
Okay.
Something's wrong, but you can hear me. That's all.
Yes.
We
Yeah,
can hear you, we
you.
can see you.
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Let me plug my
So-
phone in.
So the rabbi's still on vacation?
He's
Yeah,
here.
still on
There.
vacation.
Or
Oh,
he's
okay.
he's on Zoom, but he's
Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Oh,
It's a
yeah.
working
Sure,
vacation,
yeah.
unfortunately. Well, good for us, but you know.
I switched from a local Mexican hotel that you may remember from last week to the DoubleTree. So you can see the view.
Oh, very nice.
Oh,
Oh,
There's an
That-
island
that-
out there.
you're
that's the
coming
best.
in. Your volume is, can you turn your volume up a little?
You're talking to me?
Yes, Rabbi.
Okay, hold on.
I'm gonna turn mine on my computer up.
My volume is up. Oh, wait. Yeah, my
Okay.
volume's up the whole way.
Okay, well, then
That's a
we
little
might
better.
adjust yours.
You can't hear me very well, Ah,
I hear
you.
We hear you.
but
We hear you.
it's okay. It's full volume or not so great?
That's
Oh, it's
fine.
good.
We're
That's
good.
fine.
We're good.
I just
Oh,
lost
look
you.
at
How
all
to
the
lose you?
people that we have.
Shalom, everyone.
Hi,
Hello.
welcome
Michelle.
back.
Hello.
All right, let's go ahead and start. Again, make sure that you are muted if you're not speaking. Have your video on so we can see your smiling faces, and please be respectful of others. Let us begin with the blessing.
Baruch
Elohim
Elohim melech
Haolam,
Asher
Shana, B'mitzvotav,
V'tzivanu,
V'tzivanu,
Blessed are you,
you, Adonai, our God, ruler
Lord
of
of the world, who
who has
sanctified
sanctified us with your commandments and commanded us to engage in the words of the Torah. Amen.
Amen.
Hey, Rabbi from Mexico.
Well, hi, Steve, and thank you, everyone, and welcome back. I'm going to put on the gallery view so I can see everybody. And welcome to Rochelle. How are you recovering, Rochelle?
I'm recovering really well. My only issue is that I have a giant hematoma on the side of my hip, which is causing a lot of undue pain. It's kind of stunting my ability to, I guess, recover as quickly as they had expected. But yeah, it's other than that, I'm now, closer to becoming a Terminator.
Wow.
I'm going to terminate the bad people.
And
So
it's going to be very hard for her to go through airport security. They're going to have to look at this part and this part and, inspect all of your operating instructions. Anyway, welcome to everybody. And I'm coming from Mazatlan, Mexico. And if you hear the ocean to my left, then don't be surprised. So good morning. We're moving into a new book today, and it's a book that is it's in some ways very difficult, and that is the book of Leviticus, in Hebrew Vayikra. So the first page of your handouts from Harvey Fields, page 97, calls it Parshat Vayikra, which is both. So Vayikra is the name of the book, which means in English, and he called out, or he called, or he stated, or something along those lines. But in English, we call it Leviticus. And the Parsha is also called Vayikra. So the book is Vayikra, and the Parsha is Vayikra. Okay, thank you, Lorraine. So as you can see, the entire first Parsha talks about different kinds of sacrifices. And there's 5 different kinds, and each one is described in great, some would say excruciating detail. And I say excruciating for 2 reasons, both because it's rituals we don't do, so we don't really care about it. If it was a description of a ritual that we do, like, I don't know, making the kiddush over the wine, then reading about how they did that in the biblical times would be quite interesting. But it's not. It's a ritual that we don't have anymore because there's no temple, among other reasons. The second reason excruciating is because some of these sacrifices involve animals. So killing animals for the sake of God is probably counterintuitive and against our sense of respecting animals and life itself. So there's a lot of difficulties. If I could, I would skip this parsha and let Andre teach it or let Riva teach it. But you know, that would be kind of not evading my duty. So here I am. Fortunately, Harvey Fields, you know, has dealt with people like us, and so he doesn't go into too much detail about.
Stop it.
I'm sorry. Did somebody ask anything?
That was Shirley. I muted her.
Okay. Okay, and then so fortunately, Harvey Fields deals with people like us all the time, or dealt with people like us all the time. So he understands that he has to bring this parsha into a context that we can relate to. So as you see on page 99, he calls Perek Aleph the meaning of sacrifice and prayer. So right away, he connects the sacrifices to prayer. And secondly, he talks about the meaning, the religious meaning, the spiritual meaning, the meaning. And we're interested in meaning in life. We're interested in meaning in Judaism. We're interested in the meaning of ritual. So all of these things now frame the discussion in a much more amenable way. I do want to point out that if you are interested in Leviticus, there is a series of scholarly works by Jacob Milgram, who's a professor in California, and his daughter Shira Milgram is a Reform rabbi, and Jacob Milgram has really spent his career, the last 50, 60 years or longer, writing books primarily, if not exclusively, on Leviticus. And I have in Jamaica several of his books, 600, 800 pages on the book of Leviticus that go into the detail of what the Bible is actually talking about. Okay, that's my opening, just trying to frame what we're going to look at in terms of the actual text versus the discussion. We're not so interested in the details of the actual sacrifices. We're much more concerned with the meaning. Any opening questions, comments, or brief statements? Yes, Minya.
This may be redundant to what you said about killing animals, but when I read the first page on 97, I think the cruelest thing I ever heard, because I always thought Jews killed animals as painlessly as they could. That's why they kill chickens the way they do. That's why they kill cows, beef, whatever the way they do. But this one, when it talked about birds, and it said it is to be torn open by its wings, I thought that was the most horrific thing I ever heard of. I know it's probably, like you said, the things we read here about animals were horrible, but I have to point out that I thought that went against everything I always heard about humane slaughter of animals.
I agree. And so, oh, and Pam has just joined us, and I want to express my condolences to Pam on the passing of her mother. And
Thank you. Sorry I'm late.
no, it's okay. And, you know, we grieve with you. And she almost made 100 years of age. And Dave said, you know, she was very, she really enjoyed her life and she got the most out of it. and she would have liked to have seen age 100, but I guess, if she'd moved to Arizona, I'm sure she would have. But anyway, we express our condolences with you, Pam, and your family. So yes, this is not good. And that's, so we could approach now what I don't believe in doing is apologizing for what's in the Bible. So like there are people who will say, well, it doesn't mean that, or they didn't do it that way, or it's something like that. I mean, the Bible's an ancient text, and whatever it says here, we have to take at its word. And then the best policy is just to go over it quickly and not dwell on it. We're interested in the parts of the Torah that do have spiritual lessons for today, but we do want to be aware that our spiritual ancestors did some things better and some things worse, and that's just the way it was. So
Ray has her hand up. She has a comment or comment.
okay, before that, Minya, did you want to respond? Okay, Ray,
You have to unmute.
I just suspect that these animal sacrifices were done all around them by idolaters, because I don't see how they could be so picayune about every little item like the birds if they hadn't gotten the idea.
I didn't want to respond.
So I wanted to point that out.
Yeah, this is sort of going into what Sai would probably ask, and that is, what were the other, the Canaanites and the Philistines and the other tribes around them, what were they doing at the time? And the answer is, I don't know, but Ray's assumption, which I think is probably, has a lot of merit, is that they were probably doing similar things. And so, that's where they got it from probably. And it wasn't a well thought out policy, let's be nice to birds or let's torture birds. It was just something that came in culturally before anyone thought about it. And then it was part of the established ritual. And then they couldn't really change it, even if they'd wanted to. Okay, any other comments? Bernie, D, Riva. Yes, Bernie.
As I read this, and I read in the Denver Post this week, there's a discussion about a local cult. And I see a lot of similarities. To me, this whole thing about sacrifices and sin and whatever is designed by the authors to keep the people in line. And that's exactly what cult leaders do.
So are we a cult today in Sun City, Arizona? With
no, because I can tell you to go pound salt if you tell me to do something.
Well, I do tell you to do something. I say I said fast in Yom Kippur. I said we'll come to Torah study. I said that donate generously to the temple's annual appeal. I said don't eat oink oink. I said come to Friday night services, etc., etc.
But if any of those I choose to disregard, I may disregard them without fear of retribution.
But at some point, I might try to make you feel guilty, or I might even say to you, Bernie, you really should do that. I can't understand,
I had a Jewish mother. You can't make me feel guilty.
So the cult is just much more coercive,
right?
And it's not, and of course, if a religion's based on thousands of years of tradition, it's got a little more authority and sanctity, but just based on being historical.
But Yeah, but when this happened, they didn't have 1,000 years of tradition.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Okay, then let's get into it. We're on page 99 on the left, Parakal, the meaning of sacrifice and prayer. Who would like to read?
Rabbi, I have to believe we're actually on bet.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you are right. Thank you, Steve. Page 101, defining sin in Jewish tradition, Parak Bet at the very bottom left, right-hand column. Sorry. Who'd like to read? Okay, Rochelle.
I totally thought someone else was going to put their hand up before me. Okay.
Well, I have a question. Can I just ask, why are we skipping all of that? I thought there was a lot of really interesting things for discussion under the meanings of sacrifice and prayer. But I guess I was wrong, so I read that.
You're not wrong, but what Riva and Steve and I did at some point is we went through them and we picked, fairly randomly one chapter with the idea that here we'll do a different chapter.
Okay.
So it's not that that Bet is better than Olive. It's just that this year we're doing Bet. Next year we'll do Olive or Gimel or Dalet or, so we just didn't want to do the same one 2 years in a row.
Thank you for the explanation.
And thank you, Riva, for doing a lot of that work. She created this huge chart, and Steve and I thought it ran out in a few months ago. And then she said, no, she'd done a whole another year's worth of stuff. So, yes. Okay, back to you, Rochelle.
Okay. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Parshat Vayikra not only speaks of 5 different kinds of sacrifices to be offered by the people and their leaders, but it also identifies the reasons for offering sacrifices. Many were presented as gifts to bring the worshiper closer to God and to express thanks for harvests, festivals, personal celebrations, good fortune, healing in time of sickness, and the achievement of peaceful relations between individuals and nations. Among the many different kinds of sacrifices are those having to do with the sins of the people of Israel or of individuals. Parashat Vayikra speaks of the Ola offering and the Chatat, am I saying that right? And the Asham, thank you, Asham sacrifices as means of achieving sacrifices as means of achieving relief from guilty feelings and forgiveness from God for wrongdoing. In identifying forms of behavior that require offerings at the temple, the Torah and those who interpret it present us with unique definition of sin. For example, the Ola or burnt offering, the first sacrifice mentioned in our Torah portion, is to be given by all people. The Torah, however, does not provide a reason for the offering. It is Rabbi Simeon ben Yochai, Yochai, a student of the famous Rabbi Akiba and a leader of the Jewish community in the land of Israel, just after the destruction of the temple, who teaches that the Ola offering is given for sinful thoughts and intentions, even if they are not carried out.
Okay, so we are entering a minefield here. So the topic is, what is sin? And now, in some contexts, I don't use the word sin anymore. When I do sermons, I sometimes will call it wrongdoing or use a different word, because sin is just such a emotionally laden term and possibly out of style with the younger generations. We don't have anyone from the really young generations. I guess Rochelle is our representative of younger. And we could call Dee's son in if we really wanted a young adult's perspective. But how do you define sin, and do you prefer the word wrongdoing? I mean, is that a positive development, or if I do that, am I evading my responsibility to say the truth? D and then whoever, D and then Marcia, and then we'll go from there.
Well, to me, I look at sin as not the actual sin itself, but what the intention is or was behind the sin. And that to me would constitute if it's a really horrific sin, obviously, that person's intention was very negative. And I think that the only way to not perform the sins is to change your intention and look within yourself.
Okay.
So,
Marcia?
When I was reading this one, though, it sounded like the Jimmy Carters who's saying that he lusted in his heart. I got nods coming from a couple people. So even if you thought about doing something bad, you have to make amends apparently for it.
Right. So,
which I think a lot of us have thought evil thoughts, but didn't follow through. You know?
Interesting. Pam.
I like the word wrongdoing. The word sin to me, I connect with the evangelical, you're going to hell, you know, type situation. To me, wrongdoing indicates, okay, you can do right doing. You're doing wrongdoing. You know, it gives you that alternative without the, you know, fire and brimstone.
But I kind of like, you know, the whole going to hell thing is a way to get my congregation to do things, right? So like I'm trying to figure out how I could coerce Bernie more. And I think if I threaten him with eternal damnation, that he'll burn in hell forever, I could get him to do what I want a lot more.
I don't think that'll go with the audience.
No. All right. Well, it's an idea I have. It's germinating in there, you know, but so sin, in your view, Pam, goes with this sort of fundamentalism where there's literally, you know, literally all these things, and sin goes with God really literally punishing you for every little thing. All right. Others, Babette, Riva, Sai, Ray, and then Rochelle.
Okay. Last night I had an email about the humongous wealth of Putin. And in replying to the person who sent it to me, I ended up saying, I wonder what he's going to do after he's dead with all this wealth. Insinuating, you know, what good was it? Was that a wrongdoing on my part? I had a bad thought about a man who certainly doesn't, whom I do not admire, named Putin. I'm just being facetious.
But it's a good idea. I mean, how can we say that ideas and emotional responses are somehow quote unquote sins? You know, so Ray reads the paper. She doesn't like what she reads about Putin. She automatically feels, I don't like this guy. And he's apparently got so much wealth while many people in Eastern Europe are suffering that he doesn't need that boat. You know, he's got like a $600 or $800 million, what do they call it? Those boats for the
Yacht.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big yacht.
And pretty much all of the oligarchs in Russia, they all have these $800 million boats. You know, it's like something you have to be an oligarch. So, you know, and by its very nature, it's just entirely wasteful. That's a huge amount of money that could go to help people. And they just don't need that. They could just have a nice house and that should be enough. They can go on a vacation. They don't need their own, you know, 4,000 foot boat. But so how can you say that Ray, for feeling this way, is committing any sort of sin? It's hard for me to think that she's doing that, you know, but we'll have to see how Ray will let you know by the end of today whether you've been doing lots of sins or not. Meanwhile, I guess try not to think about Putin too much. Babette.
Well, I think we could separate the thought and the deed, it's if it occurs to you, do you follow through or do you walk away? That kind of, power, your power over negative thoughts, or I'm gonna retaliate. Are you better off retaliating, or are you better off walking away? I think we should differentiate.
Okay. Thank you, Babette. Marcia.
So do the Orthodox put such strict rules about their behavior around them to keep them from having evil thoughts for which they consider that alone to be a sin? Like in the process of the women covering up and the men never touching the woman even to shake hands, or something like that, or separating themselves in the synagogues from each other at prayer time. They don't want to be in contact so that they wouldn't have any, extraordinary sexual thoughts out of the their norm. If you have to remove yourself from society to keep from thinking anything evil, then, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, And I think that what Babette said, what I was saying before about Jimmy Carter, we all are going to have things saying, mumble to ourselves about the bad driver on the road or something like that. Do we have to go into penance for that after the fact? It's just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Okay, I guess Rochelle, Riva, and Ray, is that acceptable? Okay, Rochelle.
Okay, and I just love what you just said, Marcia, Babette, and Ray. Everybody is just talking with such wisdom. It's amazing to sit here amongst this. I really like that you talked about that voice in your head. Everybody has that thought, and I think that that's our gift. I never thought that, I was never taught that thinking was sinful. It was always the act, that we were given the sacred space in our head for sanity. Sometimes, smacking that person who's cutting us off constantly on the highway inside of our head is healthy. It keeps us from actually performing a physical sin.
Good example.
Yes, it really truly does. And I even taught my children this. I taught them what you think and what you do are so separate. What goes on in your head is for you. If you can't handle your thoughts, that's between you and God if you choose. Your actions, that is a whole different story. The whole world would know. And you must own up to that. So I don't know. I'm a bad person, I guess. I have a lot of sins because I have, the things I've done. But I've kept it all up here. And that's our sacred space. I feel God gave us that right to have those thoughts.
Mm-hmm. I kind of like that. How Rochelle worded that. That we have a sacred space in our heads and we're allowed to think thoughts. And I guess they have to be theoretical thoughts. Like when you found, when they arrested that kid who was planning to shoot up the high school and he had detailed plans written out on his computer, somehow, even though he hadn't done it yet, the thoughts have to be more like, this is what I would do if I could, but I'm not actually going to do them, as opposed to here's what I'm planning to do someday. But yeah, I like Rochelle's wording. Riva.
This is our sacred space. Keep it up here and it's safe. Nobody gets hurt. No foul. As soon as it leaves this space, it's everybody else's business.
So as soon as you say it to somebody or write it down, then it becomes something else. Okay, that's good. I like that. And that goes against what we're seeing at the beginning of this article, but that's okay. And I agree with Rochelle more than with what we've read so far. Riva.
Yeah, I'm always curious about some of the writing that we're reading that is carried out by some Jews or the Orthodox community in particular. And I noticed that burnt offerings, they talk about it looks like if you're baking bread or doing something with flour and oil. And I know Orthodox Jews, when they're baking bread, always take a little piece of the bread, and I believe they burn it.
Right.
And what I'm curious about is, do they say a prayer that, for example, is relevant to the top of that page 102, to pray to relieve them of guilt feelings for some things? I have no idea what the prayer that goes. I'm sure there's a prayer that goes with it, but I have no idea what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But I suspect it's relevant to what's right here, and it relates to how one lives one's life.
Okay. Thank you, Riva. Ray.
I remember, my parents were from Europe, so they were very Orthodox. And the ladies would talk among themselves, and every time it was something that was hurtful, they would say, poo poo, or was it, they had a little expression as if to say, God forbid. God forbid. Anything bad that they mentioned, sickness, or something that somebody accidentally did wrong, they would say, poo poo. That was something the ladies would say. So that was warding off the evil eye. I remember it was a common thing among the ladies.
And the evil eye is random, or it comes to you because you've done something bad?
Or is there, not you necessarily, but the person you're talking about, or something you have done. If they were talking about it, there was a tendency to make this little expression as if to say, God forbid, don't let it happen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Rochelle, and then we're going to go on.
Okay, thank you. I would like to respond to that. And Ray, I totally know exactly what you're talking about. It comes back to the fact that once we speak words against somebody, or say, God forbid they ever have an ugly child or something, it goes back to break that point where you are not actually, I don't want to say, sending bad energy out. So when you say God forbid, that no longer means that you are actually wanting that to happen to the person. It's almost the exact opposite, but with the evil eye and stuff, it goes back to sending out negative energy to other people, making bad things happen to them because of the energy you send to them.
Okay, and Bernie, final comment, and then we're going on.
My sense of that Kanahara business, which means no evil eye, I think, is that there's some guilt involved in having good fortune.
That's how I remember it.
And like he just graduated from college, Kanahara. So he did something good. Now let's hope that no evil befalls him.
And what kind of evil are people thinking of?
Just bad luck, or the evil eye.
Okay, I guess so. It incorporates this idea that there is a certain amount of serendipity in the world, that some things happen good, luckily, and some things happen bad, and many things don't happen that could happen that might be good or bad. and you
Well-
just have to hope that you get some good, not some bad.
Well, I think that it goes back to some collective guilt that, you know, we let's hope that no evil befalls us because something good has happened and it doesn't balance out.
Mhm. Okay. Okay, Minya.
Just a quick comment about that. Evil eye is not just a Jewish thing. Other cultures have evil eyes also, but they have different ways of dealing with them. We use red ribbons. I don't know what other cultures may use, but it is definitely a international evil eye.
Oh, there's a lot more than red ribbons. There's, you know, there's all sorts of amulets and incantations and so forth, particularly in the ancient period. And so there's a lot of stuff. And in fact, there's been a proposal to do a course on ancient Jewish magic. So if you're interested in that.
I was just going to say that. Tell Reva that's another course.
All right, I see.
On the list of suggested courses, yeah.
Okay, Marcia.
The Greeks have that little blue and white pendant. Oh, it's a little, they put it on all kinds of stuff, bracelets and necklaces and whatever, and that's supposed to ward off the evil eye. So, and I am sure, as you were saying, all the other cultures have something too. Yeah.
You
And
know,
the Hamsa is another one of the things that.
right.
Yeah.
And the Hamsa is supposed to ward off the evil eye, and so it's not necessarily supposed to bring luck, it's supposed to keep bad luck away.
The Hamsa has other meaning. We had it at the Phoenix Art Museum, and you know, one figure was for his daughter Fatima, and you know, it was more not keeping away the evil eye, but a symbol of, you know, that you're a member of the tribe, that you're a believer.
Uh-huh. Okay, so it's a sense of connecting to God, and if you're connected to God, at least implicitly.
And Muhammad, yeah.
It's supposed to suggest that something good will happen, not bad. Rochelle.
Just a real quick from what I gathered when I started studying the Hamza, if you place it upright, it's for prosperity. If you put it down, it's to ward off bad luck. It's to keep evil from entering.
So upwards, it's to get good, and downwards is to prevent evil. So could you wear
Correct.
two of them, one up and one down?
Why not?
Sigh.
Well, when push comes to shove, basically that's the reason we have a mezuzah. You know, we're looking not necessarily for good luck per se, but our belief in God is the idea that God is going to be good to us because of our belief. And if God is good to us, good things will happen. It goes round and round and round. Very simple.
Right. And many people take this quite seriously, that if they have misfortune, they go around checking their mezuzahs
That's right.
to make sure that they are okay. Or replacing the mezuzahs even, or adding mezuzahs to doors that you didn't necessarily worry about before. But all right, as we read the next paragraph, we're back to the concept of evil thoughts. So it's natural to think negatively about other people, and of course to think about sex, and to think about wanting to make lots of money and have a 800-foot yacht. I mean, you know, all sorts of things that are, you know, part of what the Christians would call the 7 deadly sins are part of, you know, just natural life, right? So how do you deal with that, and what are you to make of that? We're moving into the Ramban, Nachmanides, a 13th century mystic from Spain, a paragraph on the bottom left-hand corner of, I think it's page 102. Rochelle, you're still willing to read?
I can, unless someone else would like to. Okay. Nachmanides agrees, explaining that it is natural for human beings to have all kinds of evil thoughts. We think of cheating our neighbors, of twisting the truth to suit our selfish purposes, of secretly taking that which does not belong to us, of committing sexual offenses. Many different thoughts and intentions rise in our minds. For Nachmanides, these secret thoughts, known only to God, are the first level of sin. They are the first inclinations that lead to wrongdoing. For that reason, one offers the olah as a means for removing any guilt for such reflections or intentions.
Okay, stop. So this is, so we have Nachmanides on one side and Rochelle on the other. So Rochelle's position, that she said a few minutes ago, is that as long as you're just thinking it in your mind, and as long as it's hypothetical and not intended to be carried out, and as long as you don't put it on paper or start telling your neighbors that this is your private thoughts, and it's not only harmless, but it's a way to vent or work off steam or whatever you call it. Nachmanides, on the other hand, doesn't seem to feel that way, that even thinking it, it becomes what he calls a first level of sin. And you have to offer a certain type of sacrifice, the basic kind of sacrifice, as a means to removing guilt for these. Now, Harvey Fields uses the word at the end of that paragraph, reflections or intentions. Of course, they're very different. Rochelle is talking about reflections, not intentions, right? So if you have intentions, that's something else, right? Like I want to rob a bank and I've been in there and I'm casing it out and I'm hiring auxiliary bank robbers to help me, and we're picking a fortuitous day. This is not reflections of just like a fantasy of robbing a bank. This is a plan, and that's not covered. But if you're just reflecting, then according to Rochelle, will be fine. According to Ramban, at least as Harvey Fields puts it, even if you have intentions, it's bad, but even if you have reflections, it's still a little bit bad. Okay, comments, responses. Pam, and then maybe Marcia.
I believe God gave us our brain as the filter. And that's why I totally disagree with Nachmanides, because we have this filter. God wants us to use this filter and doesn't punish us when we do use the filter in a positive way.
So we want to have a filter. So you agree with Rochelle that having a filter is important, and as long as those first stage, what Harvey Fields calls reflections, are just reflections in your mind, and maybe you could share it with your husband, is that still okay? But you can't go around telling other people, and you can't start planning to do it, then it's okay. And it's not only okay, it's good. And that's what the filter is for. Most people don't say everything they think, but there are people that do. And we have congregants who will say to me everything they think. And it's upsetting. I want positive and negative feedback. So if somebody thinks that something I'm doing is not good, they need to tell me in a friendly way at the appropriate time in the appropriate manner. We want feedback, but just blurting it out, like at the end of a service, for example, your tie is so ugly, it ruined my, prayer ability or something. It's just not the place and the time and the manner to do that. So, so normally people have enough sense to wait a few days and then send a polite email explaining, everything was great, but maybe you could, but people without filters don't do that. They think it and they say it exactly as they think it without any moderation or mediation. Pam.
Yeah, opening your mouth is bypassing the filter.
Oh, Oh, I see. Filtering means not saying it at all,
Right.
ever? All
No.
right.
No, thinking it is the filter. Saying it and taking it out on another person is, bypassing the filter. And I think God gave us the filter for a reason.
Okay, Rochelle and then Cy.
It's just like that. Has anybody ever been on a plane and been near somebody who needed to be taken down with a deodorant spray? Right? You think it. You may even watch yourself in your mind jump back and spray someone down with deodorant and then be like, and then you go back to your seat, right, in your mind. But you're not going to say it and you're not going to go do it. Now, whether you feel guilty about thinking that, I think that's kind of on you. But me, I may not even feel guilty about doing it to some people, but I don't. But it's one of those examples.
And so you have to consider how the person's going to react. You want to give constructive criticism in a way that they can accept. And so you have to know enough about the person to know that they're willing to take some constructive criticism. And you have to figure out how to deliver that constructive criticism in a way that's honest, but is tactful. And if you can't do that, then you probably have to not say anything. Okay, who is next is Cy, Riva, and Marcia.
I think one of the basic problems is that what I think is right may not be what you think is right. For example, suppose I'm in a political situation where I think an insurrection is the proper thing to do in a country, and you may not think so. So how do you come to a conclusion there?
Mm-hmm. Well, we all have political differences and we analyze things differently. Okay, who was next? Riva, and then Marcia, and then Dee.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this is they're discussing sort of a hierarchy of bad behavior. And not everybody believes that, this is worse than that, but I think the discussion of what is bad behavior and how do you handle it and how does it affect other people is a useful discussion, although we certainly wouldn't agree where on the hierarchy everything fits.
Right.
Okay, Marcia and then Dee.
I was just going back a couple of people to Rochelle, and there's so many times, I sat next to an Indian lady halfway back, and she had one of those wreaths of decaying flowers around her neck. And I was so glad to change planes at O'Hara because I didn't have to say, I was going to change my seat. And I really thought I didn't want to offend her just to, ask, I just felt so bad about it. And I would not have, didn't want to offend her. So I toughed it out for 3 or 4 hours, didn't inhale too hard. So, yeah, I don't agree with this Nachmanides with the reflections. I agree more back to what Rochelle said about and with Pam, with the filter and keeping it inside. There's always, you're going to disagree with somebody's stance. You're going to think bad thoughts at times. There's no, it's inhuman to think, that you couldn't do, but that's what I was referring back to with trying to avoid them by not putting yourself in the place of temptation for sin. I think that that's ridiculous. So that's where I think anyhow. Okay.
Okay. Dee.
I didn't have my hand up, but as long as I was just doing this with my screwed up shoulder. I agree again with Pam and Rochelle. I think it's very important to have a screen. And obviously we learn to have some sense of tact with regard to how we approach somebody because we don't want to insult or hurt somebody's feelings. They may, anyway, that's what I agree. I think it's wonderful and important to have a screen so that we have some sort of diplomacy when we are, in conversation with somebody. If we don't like what they say, or for whatever reason, we can think a negative thought, but we're not going to say it.
Now, remember that the whole thing here, these rabbis are trying to find what is the purpose of this first type of sacrifice by minya. So they have this lowest form of sacrifice, but the Bible doesn't give a reason. So that's they're trying to come up with a reason. So that's the whole the context for our discussion. Let's do one more paragraph. Let's do the box, which still talks about this first type of sacrifice and this possible reason for this first level of sacrifice, which I don't think anyone here seems to like, but maybe somebody does. So let's read it and see if there's anybody who will defend this interpretation of the first level sacrifice. Okay, Rochelle, you can do a little more in the box. Sinful thoughts.
Okay. Rabbi Bakya ben Asher, author of Kad HaKamak, am I saying that right? Kamak. Okay. Commenting on the rabbinic observation that sinful thoughts are more injurious than the sin itself, says it is more difficult to withdraw with sinful thoughts, for habitually thinking about a sin will automatically lead to its commission. He also notes the opinion of others that when one plans to commit a sin, one actually prepares oneself to do more than one sin. For example, if one thinks of stealing or robbing, one prepares oneself even to kill in order to accomplish one's desire.
All right.
Wow.
So it's harder to stop thinking about certain things. So I've been thinking about robbing the Wells Fargo down in the Fries near me, but then they closed the branch because of COVID, so I couldn't do it. So is thinking about this worse than actually doing it?
Do you think that's schizophrenia?
How so?
Well, they don't have that filter. They follow through.
And she's right. They listen to that, they suffer from auditorial and, visual hallucinations.
Okay.
And they listen to those voices and they act on those voices a lot of times. That's where the suicides and violence comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pam?
I had a friend who had an imaginary machine gun on their front of the car. And when he got cut off in traffic, he would operate his imaginary machine gun. And he said that made him ease off. And, that was his, he was taking care of it. And it's the same thing. I mean, that's why I disagree with this idea that you are going to go in to do worse things because of this initial, sinful thing you were thinking about.
Interesting. Yeah, and I don't quite see that. Bill, your choice, your chance.
Just an observation. All these sacrifices are related to negative activity. And of course that makes sense. You want to have a society that follows norms and follows good behavior. But I wonder why there isn't more comment on gratitude. There was some comment that the Ola is also given for thanking for happy occasions. And I think it would have been important to just emphasize more of the positive aspects of gratitude, because that's a very important part of society, of happiness, really. So that's my comment.
Yeah, there may be other sacrifices that are not on this list of 5 that do, that are more in terms of gratitude. So this list is not a comprehensive list of all the sacrifices, it's just one particular list. So that's an interesting, the other thing that's, is that another course that the Adult Education Committee is considering is on Jewish character trait of gratitude. And that's also been sent on to Rivas. So I'm one step ahead of you, Bill. And if you want that as a full course, you can
Lobby.
Lobby. Riva will give you all the members, and you could send them incessant emails every day. Yeah, thanks, Bill. Gratitude, very important. And again, it does show the limits of this whole sacrificial system. It was designed a long time ago, and it may not meet most of our contemporary needs. Another point Bill made that's interesting is the whole sociological concepts of norms. What is a norm of a society, and how do you define deviance, right? So deviance, when we hear the word deviance today, we frequently associate it as sexual deviance, but that's not necessarily the word in the sociological theory. Deviance is anything that you do that's off of the norms of that society. So if everybody is in the habit, or most people in the habit, of taking a walk by the ocean in Mazatlan at 4 or 5 p.m. every day, and you don't walk along the Malecon at that time, you're kind of breaking a norm. Now, that may not have any significance, or it may. Some norms don't really matter. They're just cultural norms. Other things are there for a purpose, and if you violate them, people may get upset, even though there's no apparent harm done. And then others might actually cause harm, or be at risk of causing harm. So you have the whole concept of deviance and norms, sociological theories. Yes, Marcia, and then Riva.
So I walk into the fruit vendor, the grocery store, and I'm saying to him, how are these grapes? Are they good? And I take one off and I taste it. Now I've stolen a grape. But in a lot of societies, that's kind of the norm, or they'll give me a taste of the salami over at Fry's before I buy it, But if I were to reach over and grab a piece of the salami or cheese or whatever it is, then that would be stealing. So now in the society that allows me to eat the grape, that's normal. Okay, so that's the way it is. And then if I go into Fry's and I start eating grapes, they're going to say, hey, stop eating grapes. You got to pay for those grapes,
Oh
They say bank robbers start on grapes.
That you see that? It's the grapes.
I can see what's happening to me already. I go to Fry's primarily because they do leave the grape bags open, and you can see other people have already started. So it seems perfectly normal and natural and acceptable to grab a couple. Whereas in Costco, they're wrapped up in a way that you can't get to them. So they're clearly sending you the message. There's no tasting acceptable here, really. Although every once in a while, somebody just breaks open a package of something and takes anyway. But they're breaking a norm because, the store is clearly sending different messages. Riva.
Yeah, I appreciate that field so often places in time and location so many of the commentators. And I think so often the commentary says more about the individual making the comments or the period of time that they live in. And so the domino effect on bad behavior, which we see in this box, I think speaks to that issue. It's hard to tell if the person who wrote it, is sort of perhaps a little bit obsessive compulsive themselves and has trouble controlling their thinking, or if it was the period of time that influenced what he's thinking. But often I think it's relevant of who says the commentary and what period of time or what the culture was at the time it was said. And, and I don't agree with much in this box either. I don't think the role of the domino effect is that big a deal in terms of what you think leads to horrible behavior, inevitably.
Mhm. Okay. Interesting. Responses to Riva? Marcia agrees. Ray? Lorraine? Shirley? Steve?
Can I go
Marcia.
back?
Yes.
So much, I mean, as we go through all these readings, I'm always in my mind putting the context of when it was written in there, which is what I believe Sai does a lot too. I think we have to say, when was this, and what, as you said, Rabbi, what was the norm of the time? And the things change over the years. The more different things are acceptable, some things are shunned, and we have to take it as a writing of its time, of its people at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, and some of these insights are more useful than others. It's just the way it is. But I think grappling with this idea of sin is important because it's clearly in our traditional liturgy, and we have to kind of decide if it's a concept that we continue to find meaning in, or should we just call everything wrongdoing? And if we call everything wrongdoing, then what does that mean? But I think that when Jimmy Carter gave an interview to Playboy magazine,
Yep.
and he said, I'd sinned by lusting in my heart, and people's response was that they kind of thought he was nuts, or they made fun of him. Is that right? Because it seems so obvious that men are attracted to women, and that's just part of life, and that for him to define that as lusting in his heart seemed, totally over the top and ridiculous. But, maybe I'm wrong. I'm not exactly sure, why he said it and how people interpreted it. Okay. Do we want to have a new reader where on the right-hand column, a second kind of sin? And this is below the box. Okay, Pam.
Okay, I will read. Second kind of sin defined in this Torah portion occurs when a person unintentionally breaks the law. Examples of this kind of sin: one may harvest but forget to leave a portion for the poor to eat. One may neglect paying a worker at the end of the day, or one may accidentally eat a food prohibited by the Torah.
Yeah, this happens to me all the time in the Chinese restaurant. I order an egg roll, and then I realize there's a little pork chopped up there, but I couldn't see it, so I ate it by accident. I mean, all of these things are, unintentional. What does that mean, unintentional? There's a rule. It says in the Perkavot, you're supposed to pay a day worker that at the end of that day, not make him wait 3 weeks to get paid, because presumably he lives, on what he made that day. So if you don't pay him for 3 weeks, he's in big trouble. So all these rules are not that, they're not that easy to forget. So I'm not sure exactly why Harvey Field says it's unintentionally, but comments: unintentionally doing the wrong thing. Yes, Rochelle, and then Pam.
And with that being said, goes back to, what's that?
Bye, Ray.
Oh, bye, Ray. With that being said, this kind of goes back to what Reba was talking about and what Marcia was talking about. It kind of is situational. Nowadays, people do wait 3 weeks. They do wait 2 weeks. Sometimes they wait a month for their paychecks. That doesn't mean that anybody's sinning if they follow the Torah. That just means that this is the way things are done in this time.
Right. That was a very particular situation where you had a day worker like who didn't have any money, and he did it, work that day on the assumption he was going to get paid at the end of the day because he doesn't have 3 weeks savings, where, you know, if you've got enough money in the bank, as long as you get paid, you don't care when it is. But in this case, it did matter, and everybody knew it mattered, including the employers. So yeah.
Yeah,
Back to
but we've all committed an intentional sin. You know,
But give
we've done something.
Give me an example of.
Well, I don't know why it would be considered a sin, but I've always learned that a sin is anything that has a negative outcome. A sin of your actions could be considered a sin if it has a negative outcome. I held a door open for somebody when they were in a wheelchair recently. That person cussed me off. That action resulted in a negative, response. It was not a positive thing as I had planned for it to be. Ergo, I thought of myself as I sinned. I did not consider that this person may have the ability to get the door open for themselves, or might be offended if somebody else does something for them.
Mm-hmm.
That was an unintentional in my part.
Okay.
Or like you said, accidentally eating something that had something we weren't supposed to eat, or accidentally slapping somebody. I'm just kidding, but yeah, you don't.
Well, I guess people eat things that have stuff that they have allergies against by mistake. There was the stock investor in Connecticut a few months ago that he ordered a shake in a shake shop or something for his child who had a peanut allergy or some allergy, and he said to them, does it have anything? And they said no, and then it did. And his kid got sick, and he went back there and started screaming at them and throwing stuff, and then he got fired from his job. And he said, it was a whole mess, but I guess these things do happen, that you can eat things, or someone can eat things that they're not supposed to. Sai,
you have to unmute.
I like to go back to the idea as to who wrote some of this stuff. And the more we read, the more I believe that there's this whole concept by the writers of control. They are trying to control a group of people by setting up so many of these rules and regulations. And it bothers me that in doing this, they are separating these very, very basic good people from the rest of the world. And I think that's been one of our problems going forward. The fact that we are different because of separation that happened thousands of years ago.
but remember, this is also pre-modern thinking, where all societies were divided and were controlled. So the Jews were minorities in both the Christian North and the Muslim South, and the Muslims and the Christians respectively were doing the same thing. So it was all of societies were structured differently. So that's
but doesn't make them right. But doesn't make it right. We're trying to find,
it doesn't make it relevant for today, but it was probably the most effective strategy at the time. But it shows how you have an enormous task of reinterpreting things for today, because a lot of the stuff in rabbinic writings is written under completely different assumptions. Marcia.
Oh, let's go back to the 10 Commandments. So most of these sins really come around what was in the 10 Commandments. They are elaborating. It's like a weaving, like a tapestry, where they're trying to take the sin of this, of the sin of that, and extrapolate it out into other little mini sins from the big one. I mean, you do not kill, do not steal, do not, honor your parents, do not dishonor them. In other words, if you want to take the negative side, take all those sins. Those are the important ones. Those are the biggies in life, and, to say, oh, I looked at somebody funny, that's not necessary. I mean, I think it's just writing and creating a series of laws just so that you could aggravate people. Or you just put them in a like size of the box, try to control them, I think we have to look at the 10 Commandments.
Okay, Rochelle. Thank you, Marcia.
And that is so smart. What a great way to look at it. And that's what this comes down to. You're right. They're dissecting the actual act down. They just dissect it. They start saying, well, not only do not murder, don't even think of murdering. Well, that's just silly. That's just not human how we are. I don't know. To me, I think that's what, like I said, it's a sacred place. It keeps me sane.
Now, you know that they're developing the metaverse now.
Yes.
Facebook and others. And already there are complaints that people's behavior in the metaverse is completely inappropriate. And of course, it's not real, but you have an avatar and you're living in this fictitious world. And some people seem to feel because it's not real, you can do whatever you like. So you can go up to somebody who looks like they're having a better time than you and just punch them in the stomach, in the metaverse. Well, it's true. And there's no there's no police and there's no retribution. There's so if you have several friends also have their avatars in the metaverse, you can be protected, or you can jump to a different plane or just disappear, and there's no punishment or any response, and you've gotten away with it. But there's a real person behind that other avatar who is not feeling that they got punched in the stomach literally, but they feel rather angry and upset about being mistreated in what they take quite seriously. So is that a real misbehavior, or is that, since it's not real, it doesn't count?
Well, and that's the thing. This is where people have to decide whether their safe space should be invaded. Do I have an appropriate mind to go into somebody else's safe space and respect it? I think just like owning a weapon, just like driving a car, there's got to be some sort of mental stability. There must be something. If something's off about anybody's psyche, a popsicle stick is dangerous.
But they give driver's license and gun licenses to most people. And we all know that there's a certain percentage of drivers on the road who are a threat to life and security. We just hope we don't run into them, literally as well as figuratively. That wasn't an intentional comment, but it fits. But if you do, there's not much you can do. You've got these people that will just veer into the oncoming traffic and smash into you head on your side of the road. And of course, the police will be able to see clearly that the other driver was the one who just went off their side. But the other driver may be dead. And so you're the one left to deal with the injuries, hopefully not too severe, but could be. And what can the police say? You can sue their estate. you know, so, but, you know, Riva.
Yeah, I particularly like what Hirsch wrote right under his picture and his name. One sins from carelessness, the sinner through error of evaluating unintentional sin, you know, calibrating the impact of carelessness. And I think of the example that was given earlier of somebody who was given food, said, I can't eat peanuts because I have a horrible allergy to it. And the server said, no, there's no peanuts in it. I've been in that situation with other people, including somebody who ended up in a hospital. And I think I think when you are in a situation like that, you know, you look very carefully at the server. Is that somebody who knows what he's serving? Is it somebody who's new there? Is there somebody who has enough sense to ask the chef, is this safe? Or is it somebody who's busy and doesn't want to pay attention to you and is in fact careless? It says, oh, it's fine, without giving it any further thought. So I like the expression that it's carelessness if they do not take full care with their whole heart and soul. You know, I think that's very meaningful and very relevant.
Okay. And then the next paragraph after that, it said in the Chamalebu, it says no excuse that the sinner had no evil intention and that it was merely forgetfulness, just carelessness and irresponsibility. So this does not really matter. So if you do, but doesn't intention matter quite a bit, or doesn't it? Bernie and then Marcia.
Well, I'm listening to this and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, if I had to go by those rules, I would do one of two things. Either I'd do absolutely nothing ever or join a cult where they tell me everything I have to do when I have to do it.
Well, I'm working on Bernie. I'm going to try to get him to conform to the norms that I set, and I'll let you know how the experiment goes. Marcia.
Texting while driving. So there we have thoughtlessness and just irresponsibility, and you can cause a death that way. And I reached behind the seat to grab something and I had a car accident. Never again. You know, it was just, it just happens. It was an accident, but sometimes these accidents are because of something we've done, and we've got, you know, I realize that now. The phone is like there, you know. So when I'm in the car, you've got to consider what you're doing when you're doing it. And, you know, and that's a different story. That's not one of the, it's what this is about. It's the thoughtlessness of it, you know. So I agree with some of this stuff, but I still think it, you know, it's still back to the 10 Commandments. You know, a lot of stuff will be like subtitled underneath it, you know.
Okay, thank you. So does it matter if you have evil intention or not? Lorraine or Cy or Shirley or Dee? Steve?
Yes, it does have consequences. You know, if you have those thoughts, I mean, that's.
I think our mental institutions are wrong. It's their interpretation, or they live that way. Wrong is wrong, in my opinion. I mean, running your car into the opposite side of the road when you're not drunk and you're not asleep and hurting, possibly killing that person is wrong. And I'm question the police. They'll say, oh, I didn't realize I was speeding. I didn't know that was the speed limit. That's what rules are for us to follow.
But for example, like with Rochelle's situation where she opened the door for someone with the wheelchair, she had good intentions, but the person felt like, you know, leave me alone. I can do this all by myself. I feel like he also, or the person that was in the wheelchair, should have been appreciative whether
Yeah,
he
but
needed it or not.
And I feel very happy that they want to help me. So I must be weird. So I don't have to struggle with my packages and the heavy door in a store.
All right.
You have to understand where the other person's coming from too.
So Lorraine, does it matter? Marcia gave the example of somebody's driving and texting. And because they're texting, they're still looking out the window, but not 100%. And they smash into a pedestrian, as opposed to somebody who says, I want to kill as many people as I can. He sees some pedestrians, he deliberately aims for them, speeds up and smashes into them. In both cases, the pedestrian is hit by.
Your voice is going in and out, so I don't.
Can everybody hear me?
I don't hear the question because your voice.
No, I think my voice is going okay on the.
Oh,
right?
good. Then it must just be me. So could you repeat the question, please?
Does it matter whether in Marcia's first case, the person's texting while driving accidentally hit some pedestrians? In case 2, it's somebody that is like these people that decide to do a random attack, and the person just says, I'm going to run over some people, and deliberately runs them over. In both cases, the pedestrians are hit by a car. How much does it matter whether person was texting or the person was deliberately aiming for them?
It matters in what justice will be meted out.
So you would say the person who did it deliberately would get many more years in prison.
Yeah.
And that if you did it by accident, it's still not good, but it should be much, much less.
Right, because we have rules about texting and driving. That it's not to be done.
Okay, D. Thank you, Lorraine.
You're welcome.
I think that it matters about intention always, and that people, there's a word called balance in making a decision. We know, like Lorraine said, that there are laws and rules about driving, so we know we're not supposed to text. And so if we know that, and if we are texting, then obviously our intention is not a good intention, because we're taking not only our life, but somebody else's life. So yes, intention matters no matter what. I do believe that.
Okay, so intention does matter. So you would agree with Lorraine that somebody with evil intention should get many more years in prison than the person accidentally texting, but the person actually accidentally texting should also be punished a little bit.
Yes, I do agree with Lorraine.
Not to nearly the same. Bernie.
Right.
Yeah, the most extreme case of that I can think of is this policewoman in Minnesota who pulled the gun instead of the taser. And I'm still struggling with what I think is right in treating that case. I think she probably got more prison time than she deserved.
Does it matter that it turns out the guy that she killed was a vicious criminal who shot one of his best friends in the head and had multiple charges for violent crimes?
Traffic violation is not a capital crime.
So it doesn't matter that it turns out that he had a long record of violence.
I don't think he really did, but it doesn't matter because it's in the moment that the event was that he was trying to escape being arrested, and she had every right to pull her weapon. It's just she pulled the wrong one.
Now, does it matter? She's a professional policewoman, right? And they have the taser on one side and the gun on the other side. So these are not like next to each other. Like, is there a certain assumption that a professional rather than an amateur should know which side is the gun, right? I mean,
She should have, but remember, this is the heat of the moment.
well, but if it's you or me and we lose our, but this is a police. I mean, when you join the police department, you're trained and you assume a certain responsibility to be able to operate in the heat of the moment, no?
That's why I'm struggling with all of this, is just because of what we're talking about.
If it was just an accident where with a Babette and she mistakes her gun for her taser, she's not a professional, so you can understand she makes a mistake. She's not but if she was a policewoman and a high-ranking policewoman, you have a higher level of obligation to be competent, I would think.
At
Rochelle.
my Asian stage, I shouldn't be carrying a weapon.
Yeah, well, it says here in the next paragraph down, it says that Nahama Leibovitz argues that the greater the person, the greater the responsibility. Each negligence, each slip of the mind, each indiscretion, each error borders on deliberate wrongdoing. So just like a police officer, like you were saying, they're a professional. They should have known better. So what a politician does and what Joe Schmo down on the bay does, even though they're the same actions, are going to have different levels of how do I want to say, of
Consequence.
discipline, so to speak.
But it's hard to understand how she could have made such a mistake like that, because you've got one on one side, one on the other. They were pulling over a car. She knew that something could happen. You would think, you would just instinctually think, there's my taser, there's my gun. And when you grab it, they're different. They feel different. They look different. They're different weights. It's just really hard to understand. On the other hand, it's clear it wasn't deliberate. She didn't know the guy. She had no motive to want to kill him. It's obviously, but I guess what would we call it is it's unintentional
Homicide.
Homicide.
But it's malpractice. It's she's clearly an incompetent
Manslaughter. I believe they got her for manslaughter or something, didn't they? No, wait.
But I guess it's malpractice.
Wasn't murder, right?
It's kind of like a dentist is supposed to know how to fill your tooth. If he leaves part of the cavity in, that's malpractice. He's a professional dentist. He has an obligation to know how to do it right. And you're relying upon him. And similarly, we rely on our police to, know how to get certain things right. Anyway, okay, Riva and then Rochelle.
Yeah, I think we're coming to the hot part of the year in Phoenix, and there are endless number of kids who die in hot cars and kids who drown in pools. And I think whenever we see one of those, we obviously appreciate the heartbreak of the family, but we're also aware that there's differences in the level of responsibility of the person who didn't take appropriate care of the kid. And I think we have so many of those cases here that they're repeatedly brought to our attention, and they're all heartbreaking. But the reality is, they'll look at things like, well, was mom, smoking dope and gambling and left the kid in the car? Or was, there are 9 kids and she didn't realize one was still left in the car? There's sort of a degree of responsibility for these terrible tragedies that has to be assessed through the legal system usually.
All right, thank you, Riva. We're coming to the end of our session already, 90 minutes. I was hoping to have a
Steve has something to say.
Steve.
Well, I was going to say also too, we're getting close to the end. So I was going to let Riva make her announcements, and then we can conclude. But Rabbi, go ahead.
I was just saying we don't have time to compare the word sin with the word wrongdoing. I mentioned this at the beginning, and we don't have time to summarize on that, but at some point in the next several weeks, as we go through the book of Leviticus, this issue of sin is going to come up, the sacrifices are going to come up, and what we want to think about today is going to come up again. So we'll have additional opportunities to discuss. Okay, over to Riva and then to Steve for the final blessing.
Just want to mention to everybody, Hot Biblical Topics is coming up quickly, starting on the 15th.
And they're hot.
And they're hot, and they're hot, and there'll be lots of room for debate and discussion. A number of people, especially in the Torah group, have mentioned that they're interested in taking the course, but have not signed up yet. So if you have any interest in taking the course, please do sign up, and please invite others to participate in the course. We know that we have a wonderful instructor for this class, and there's lots to be gained for the individual and for the temple. So please sign up now if you plan to attend, and encourage others to do so also. Thank you.
Okay, back to you, Steve.
All right, let us conclude with the final blessing. Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan banu Torah emet
Baruch
atah Adonai,
noten
haTorah.
Blessed is
Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe,
who
who
has
given us a teaching of truth,
and
planted within us the eternal
life.
life.
Blessed is Adonai,
Blessed is Adonai, giver of the Torah.
Amen,
Amen.
everyone. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you again soon. Be safe.
You too.
They will.
Hola, Rabbi.
Enjoy your
vacation.
vacation. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good to see you, Rochelle, looking so good.
What happened here? Okay, signing out.
Take care, everybody.
You too.
Bye.